Do Crohn's disease symptoms keep coming back? Tremfya guselkumab may help. At 12 weeks, rapid symptom remission was achieved in most patients taking Tremfya, and some experienced visible improvement of their intestinal lining at 12 weeks and 1 year. Individual results may vary. Tremfya is a prescription medicine used to treat adults with moderately to severely active Crohn's disease. Serious allergic reactions and increased risk of infections and liver problems may occur. Before treatment, your doctor should check you for infections and TB. Tell your doctor if you have an infection, flu-like symptoms, or if you need a vaccine. Explore what's possible and ask your doctor about Tremfya today. Call 1-800-526-7736 to learn more or visit tremfyaradio.com.
This episode is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Fiscally responsible, financial geniuses, monetary magicians. These are things people say about drivers who switch their car insurance to Progressive and save hundreds. Because Progressive offers discounts for paying in full, owning a home, and more. Plus, you can count on their great customer service to help you when you need it, so your dollar goes a long way. Visit Progressive.com to see if you could save on car insurance. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Potential savings will vary. Not available in all states or situations.
Society doesn't want to talk about menopause. And when they do, they don't make it sound very pretty. So, Walgreens is helping women change the perception and take back the narrative. Because nothing is sexier than being in control. Menopause is confidence. Menopause is power. Menopause is hot. Let's frame menopause together. Watch the Menopause is Hot story at walgreens.com/hot.
Welcome to Orioles on the Verge. This is Zach Spedden, joined as always by Bob Phelan and Nick Stevens. And on tonight's episode, we break down the upcoming MLB trade deadline by talking about the moves the Orioles could make, as well as one that they already did, as on Friday, the Orioles got their deadline season started by sending left-handed reliever Gregory Soto to the New York Mets in exchange for two minor league right-handed pitchers, Wellington Arcina and Cameron Foster. We'll talk about that move as well as other moves we think could happen between now and Thursday's trade deadline with our guest. He is the host of Locked On Orioles, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. It's Connor Newcombe. Connor, good to have you back on.
Yeah, it's always good to be back. I'm actually a little surprised that, well, I guess if we count Baker, it's been two trades, but I'm a little surprised that there's only been one trade to this point, but it's also been kind of slow around the league. So maybe we'll get one as we're recording. That'd be fun.
Definitely
that would be fun.
And I'll start back with the Soto trade. As I mentioned at the top of the show, the Orioles making this move on Friday to send Soto to the Mets. And in exchange, they get two pretty interesting minor league right arms in Wellington Arcina and Cameron Foster. Now, if you look at prospect lists, Arcina is clearly the more acclaimed player of the two. He's appeared on several top 30 lists, including a 14th place ranking over at Fangraphs. And just before the trade, the 20-year-old had been putting up very good numbers with Low A St. Lucie of the Florida State League. Since the trade, the Orioles have assigned him to Delmarva. As for Cameron Foster, the 26-year-old has pitched primarily at Double A this year for the Mets. And as Nick wrote about on our Substack, oriolesontheverge.substack.com this morning, when you lift up the hood, there are some interesting things with Foster beyond the stats that make him an intriguing prospect, though probably strictly a reliever. It's also worth noting that Foster is Rule 5 eligible at the end of this season, so the Orioles going to have to make a decision here in the coming months about whether or not to place him on the 40-man. But for now, let's break down this trade. And Connor, I will start with you. What did you think of the move?
Yeah, I mean, Eflin was among, I think, three guys for the Orioles that they're just going to deal no matter what. They're going to get the best deal and send them away, and that's Gregory Soto, Sir Anthony Dominguez, and Charlie Morton. I think at the point with those three veteran rentals, obviously Morton might retire, so you're probably not thinking about bringing him back. And for Soto and Dominguez, I don't know if I'd hate if either one was brought back on, a one-year deal this offseason or a two-year deal, but those are guys with big enough stuff where they're probably going to command multi-year deals because they're only about 30 years old. They've been very up and down in their career. It's not really the basket Mike Elias likes to play in for free agent relievers. And, of course, you're a selling team. So that all combines with they're going to be dealt. I think maybe the only surprising part on those guys is that teams are always looking for relievers. And so you might expect a little bit more. They'd be dealt on deadline day because you just wait as long as you possibly can, keep fielding offers, and take the best one. But there's a chance that, especially on the Aracena side, where the Orioles just said, this might be the best, highest ceiling prospect we can get for a guy like Gregory Soto. The Mets have this offer on the table. Let's just take it, knowing that Dominguez is arguably the better weapon than Soto and could bring back more. And I'm not surprised that they ended up just kind of pulling the trigger there, knowing that, hey, Soto's not our only piece. We have plenty more to deal. It's okay if we make a deal, 6 days before the deadline, even if we maybe left a tiny bit of value potentially on the table if somebody else has a need. But the other thing is with the Mets, maybe nobody needed a left-handed reliever among the contenders more than the Mets. So maybe the O's thought, hey, nobody's going to be more desperate. This is going to be our best deal we get.
I don't think any team was going to beat this offer. I mean, it's arguably just as good as the offer that the Orioles, or the trade that the Orioles made to get Soto last season, which I thought the Orioles gave up too much when they traded Moises Chase and Seth Johnson for him. I mean, Seth Johnson better pedigree than Cameron Foster, but I think Aracena probably better value than Chase had at the time, considering he's not Rule 5 eligible until after the 2026 season. Love Aracena. The more I've seen of him since the trade happened, and checking out his stats and videos, and yeah, I'm not going to spoil where he's ended up in my top 50 just yet, but it's in the top 30 area, so jumps right in there. And yeah, love the trade. And if this is a sign of things to come, I think the Orioles are about to really solidify the depth of the farm system.
Yeah, and not to jump ahead, but Aiden's comment there, yeah, Eugenio Suarez did just leave the game after getting hit in the hand. So not a trade live, but something that could shake up the next couple of days.
Saw the play, ninth inning in Detroit, Will Vest fastball. Suarez immediately went down. I mean, you don't want him to get hurt, but I mean, if you're Mike Elias, as weird as this sounds, you're not upset to see that happen. Obviously, there's something that keeps him out for a little bit, and he's back out there. But you hope it's in Diamondbacks uniform in 3 weeks.
Maybe the Tigers got word they weren't going to be able to land him. So hey, let's make sure nobody gets him.
But yeah, we'll see how that plays out over the next couple of days. Maybe Ryan O'Hearn does become one of the more valuable pieces at the deadline, and our thoughts around him change a little bit. But yeah, the Soto trade, yeah, I didn't mind it at all. Like I like Cameron Foster. Like you mentioned, he is Rule 5 eligible, but he's been assigned to AAA, so it's like get him up there with Justin Ramsey, get him there with the player development staff over the next, what do we got, about 2 months until the AAA season ends. See where he's at the end of the season. It's a big fastball. It's 7 feet of extension when you look at his stuff. So it's clearly some things there to like. Looks a lot like Zach Fruit physically, like with the delivery as well. So you see probably one reason why the Orioles were interested there. And yeah, then Aracena, I mean, he's 20? I don't even think he's 21 yet. You get a young kid. Yeah, he's got some control issues, but he's a young arm, and those walk numbers have been improving from year 1 in the DSL to year 2 in the DSL, and then from year 1 in the States to year 2 in the States. So he's throwing more strikes this year. And like you get a 21-year-old kid with what Fangraphs gives him a 60 grade current value fastball and 70 future value grade fastball. You'll figure out the rest of the repertoire as he continues to develop. But he's got that elite fastball there to bring into the organization. Yeah, I like this deal. We're 2 trades in so far, and don't really have any complaints so far up to this point.
So,
go ahead, Bob.
Oh, sorry. I was just going to say, just because Aracena was pitching in the Florida State League, which is like the only non-AAA league that gets StatCast data, we do have some Stuff Plus numbers. 4-seam fastballs at a 106, averaging 97.2 miles per hour, cutter 104, slider 100, curve 111, and changeup 121. So Stuff Plus likes his pitches, and yeah, his 31.7% strikeout rate, walk rate improving. The way the Orioles have been developing pitching the last couple of years, I like what they could do with him as a starter, but worst case, he's like a fireball and relief prospect.
Yeah, it's worth noting Aracena does not turn 21 until December. So you're looking at someone that probably will begin next year at high A as a 21-year-old. Now, I want to shift this topic over to Sir Anthony Dominguez, because I think as Connor pointed out, and I agree with this, Dominguez has been the better of the 2 pitchers this year. And aside from Soto's left-handedness, in my mind, Dominguez probably should be the more appealing trade chip for contenders right now. Based on what the Orioles got back for Soto, do any of you have higher expectations for what they should get for Dominguez, or does this not really change the calculation for you?
I think they should be able to get a pretty decent haul for Dominguez, especially if they're willing to pay down the salary, which I don't see why not. They did that a lot last deadline or taking on salary to bring guys in. I think, Rubenstein and company should be willing to pay down salaries if necessary to get a better return. And especially with Emmanuel Clase dropping with the gambling allegations, I think Dominguez is the best reliever that will probably be traded other than Ryan Helsley and Joan Duran, possibly. So, yeah, I'm expecting at least a deal that's as good as the Mets one and hopefully better. Maybe you pair him with another guy, too. If you do like Dominguez and Mullins or Dominguez and O'Hearn, maybe you can really get something decent.
Yeah, I go back to last week when people, listeners, patrons specifically, shout out to the patrons, submitted trade proposals, and me and Zach kind of just discussed them. And it was Sterling, had pulled it up here. It was Sterling who said, Sir Anthony Dominguez for Troy Melton from the Tigers, straight up. And I thought, yeah, you're like, I don't know, because Detroit, a lot of reports like right that day that we recorded of, I think did he end up coming up and making the start already or no? He did. Hopefully it went well. But it's like this is a guy who Detroit at least was looking at as a guy to use out of their bullpen if they can't land an arm. And you're like, all right, maybe not Melton, but what else was? I think we talked about like what else was going to be in Detroit system that we could get for Dominguez back. Now it's like, could you get that type of prospect back? Potentially. We'll see how desperate teams get here over these next couple of days.
I think a last year version of Sir Anthony Dominguez, you could say, is, depending on the team, a little less valuable than Gregory Soto, just because Soto throws with his left arm, and teams need that. And I talked about it on my show Friday after the trade of Soto. I said, look, the Mets lost their top two lefties, Danny Young and AJ Minter, to season-long injuries. The only lefty in their bullpen was Brooks Raley, who had pitched 3 games so far coming off Tommy John surgery and is 37 years old. That was the only lefty they had, and they're going to be a playoff team. So they desperately needed a lefty. Maybe that's why they just felt like, hey, you look around at the other lefties, it's really Soto and Danny Coulombe who are out there, and we know and love Danny Coulombe. But if you want to talk about upside, even with all of Danny Coulombe's done, you're going to strike fear into a lot more hitters, whether it's warranted or not, when you have Gregory Soto out there in a big spot in the playoffs, and they just maybe felt like, hey, let's go get him. For Dominguez, now that he's added that splitter and it's allowed him to have success against lefties, he's a reliever without split issues. He's a guy who could close games if you needed to. He could be, when he gets rolling, one of the best setup men in baseball. And as you said, Clase not getting dealt, these closers are super expensive. When you step below the closer market, Dominguez might be the best non-closer who's going to be available out there. And the Orioles should be using that to their advantage. I think they can pit some deals against each other because, again, they know they're going to deal him, but they also know they don't have to deal him right now. They can wait till third. There's a chance they just don't use Dominguez the rest of the week just to make sure he doesn't get hurt and just field offers. It's going to be tough when you play a doubleheader tomorrow to not use him, but they'll try their best. And I just think he's more useful and intriguing than I think Orioles fans think, because when you have a reliever for a year or more, you only remember when it goes wrong, and it's hard to look at the big picture of this is some of the best stuff in the majors. This is a guy who gets righties and lefties out. This is someone who is going to be a force and has had a really good postseason career when he was with the Phillies and even with the Orioles in the playoffs. So I think you could get more as long as a team is as kind of willing and needing of a player like that, like the Mets were for Soto.
Exactly. And we'll shift gears now and focus on the rotation before we get into what I think is going to be the big topic of the night, which is the position players. With what we've seen in the last few months, we've kind of had an inverse trend of the early season struggles where Zach Eflin and Tomoyuki Sagano, especially when Eflin was healthy, were fairly consistent and Charlie Morton was getting shelled. And it was, all right, how much longer can they have Morton on the roster and not DFA him? What we've seen since then is that Sagano has regressed while Eflin has battled injuries and been very inconsistent when he's been on the mound. And Morton has kind of started to look like the Charlie Morton he's been his whole career. And as someone who has a lot of playoff experience and, by all accounts, a good clubhouse presence, Morton, even on an expiring contract at his age, is a decent trade chip. Probably not as good as Sir Anthony Dominguez or Gregory Soto, but a decent one. Yet it feels like with the way that Sugano and Eflin have gone in the last couple of months, it's getting harder to trade those guys. So, Connor, I'll start back with you here. When we're through the deadline on Thursday, who is still in the Orioles rotation and who has been dealt?
Yeah, I think, again, as I said, there's no reason to hold Charlie Morton. He's got the most value out of the three, and he's highest on the list of most likely to be traded. So that combination is he's got to be gone. I mean, there's a situation where the what they get back feels a little light, but at the end of the day, you look back 2 months ago and you say, I mean, he was closer to a DFA candidate than a trade candidate. So for Charlie Morton, you're going to take what you can get, and a couple of different teams are going to want him. There's already been the rumors about, teams like the Padres and others that are interested. I hate to play start-to-start narrative, but the reality of the situation is we've only seen 2 healthy Zach Eflin starts basically since April. I mean, you could really convince me that in between the lat injury and the lower back injury that Eflin was, although he had a really good 3-start run in there at some point, you'd convince me he was never fully healthy. And, his start last week was fine. His start tonight was not very good. Cedric Mullins saved him 2 extra runs with a nice leaping home run robbery in center field. He's not missing bats. Not that he's ever missed an incredible amount of bats, but he did with the Rays and he did early on with the Orioles last year. And he's really not doing that. The velo is down. The stuff numbers are down across the board. Eflin's not old. He's still in his early 30s. And I think he'll still get a contract, a multi-year deal from someone this offseason. But I don't know if he is the pitcher that we saw down the stretch in Baltimore last year. And I don't know if a team really wants him. So for the Orioles, you look at Zach Eflin and you say, could we give him the qualifying offer? I think you could. I don't think it's awful if you paid Zach Eflin $21 million to pitch for you next year, especially with the Rubenstein. Even with, you can have gripes about what he's spending. He's been very clear that especially on a 1-year deal, the payroll is not really an issue. If they're going to bring back a guy on 1 year and they think he's going to help and it's not that long-term commitment, I think Rubenstein and Elias are kind of fine with doing that. So if you think Eflin can get a 3-year, $50 million-ish deal, if you keep him and throw him the qualifying offer and he gets you a draft pick, that pick might end up being more valuable than whatever they might get for the current version of him. So I really think they hold him. And then I know Sugano looked a lot better on Sunday. It was the Rockies away from Colorado. I just think there's so much risk there. And Eflin is a guy who, if it goes right, you could throw in a playoff game. I don't think there is any scenario where a team sends Sugano out there, not even just to start a playoff game, but in a postseason game at all. He's probably someone who's not even on a postseason roster if he gets traded. That really lowers his value. And I just think it's better for the Orioles to just have him be the one who definitely stays, eat some innings. They see how this second half goes and evaluate what it looks like if they want to bring him back for another year. I teeter on Eflin, but I just think he stays and Sugano stays and Morton's the only one gone, which could be tough for some of these other young pitchers trying to find innings. But there's probably not as many as we think at this point knocking on the door. It all depends on what the Orioles kind of get back from these trades of other guys.
Yeah, I don't. My only thing with Eflin was at this point, are you just hoping that a team views Eflin as a guy who, all right, we know we're not going to look forward to him pitching in the playoffs for us, but he can be a guy who can hopefully stay healthy and help us get through the rest of the summer into the playoffs. But then what kind of, again, like Connor touched on, what kind of value are you going to get back in return? And is it even worth dealing him for a low A prospect or a low flyer? I don't know at this point. It's nice that some of the hitters seem to be, again, you don't want to go day by day here, but it is nice to see some of the hitters, Cedric Mullins in particular, kind of light it up here these last few days. But the pitchers are going in the opposite direction, and it is making it tough. But I don't think we ever, even if Eflin was healthy and was able to get a couple starts, how big of a return were we going to be looking at here with Zach Eflin? I don't think it was very much to begin with anyway, but yeah, it's putting him in a tough situation right now. Unless I just always go back to the Padres, man. They can't rely on Yu Darvish. I don't know what else they have in that rotation, especially if Michael King. I think he pitched in a simulated game today, but see where he's at. But I'm just banking on old AJ Preller getting super desperate out there in San Diego and just pushing all the chips in. What few chips he does have at this point.
Yeah, Morton's obviously going to be gone. I think he's definitely got the most value of the starting pitchers. I think between Sugano and Eflin, one of them will get traded. I think the options are so limited as far as starting pitchers for teams to go out and get, even if it is just to get across the finish line in the regular season, and maybe if they catch lightning in a bottle to appear in the playoffs. I think probably Eflin is more likely just because of his track record. But I also wouldn't hate the qualifying offer with him either. I think he probably pitched above his head last year and is probably better than he's looked this year. Maybe the shoulder has just been kind of lingering and he's fighting through it. Maybe you get him back on that 1 year qualifying offer and a little bit of rest in the offseason, and he comes back looking more normal, his normal self. Or maybe he lights it up down the stretch and then he does sign somewhere else for more than $50 million. So I wouldn't hate keeping him around if the offer isn't very good. But I think Michael Elias is going to try to move anything that's not bolted down. So I think one of those two will go as well. And yeah, I'm expecting at least 6 more trades from here to the deadline for the Orioles.
This episode is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. You chose to hit play on this podcast today. Smart choice. Progressive loves to help people make smart choices. That's why they offer a tool called Auto Quote Explorer that allows you to compare your Progressive car insurance quote with rates from other companies. So you save time on the research and can enjoy savings when you choose the best rate for you. Give it a try after this episode at Progressive.com. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Not available in all states or situations. Prices vary based on how you buy.
Looking for HD TV on the go? With Dish Outdoors, you can get easy, no-contract, pay-as-you-go satellite TV wherever the road takes you. With a portable satellite antenna that sets up in minutes, you can enjoy reliable HD entertainment even in remote locations. No long-term commitments, just flexible, hassle-free TV for your RV or outdoor adventures. Get $100 off your setup with code SM100. Visit dishoutdoors.com to claim your offer today.
Did you know that parents rank financial literacy as the #1 most difficult life skill to teach? Meet Greenlight, the debit card and money app for families. With Greenlight, you can set up chores, automate allowance, and keep an eye on your kids' spending with real-time notifications. Kids learn to earn, save, and spend wisely, and parents can rest easy knowing their kids are learning about money with guardrails in place. Sign up for Greenlight today at greenlight.com/podcast.
So I think the position player group is probably the biggest question mark at this point. I think we know that Ryan O'Hearn is probably going to be traded. He is one of the top trade chips in baseball, and I don't think that is an exaggeration. Cedric Mullins, it seems to depend on the day. If you're going to go day by day with Cedric Mullins on whether or not he is a valuable trade option for the Orioles, but with him on an expiring contract and there seemingly being depth that the Orioles have behind him to fill in center field the rest of the way this year, he could go. And then Ramon Laureano is a very interesting case because Laureano has, I think, exceeded any reasonable expectations there could have been for what he's done for the Orioles this year. He does a lot of things very well, not just at the plate, but in the field. What makes his case perhaps a little bit more complicated is that he has a very affordable team option for 2026. So on one hand, you could look at that and say the Orioles should be able to get a lot for Laureano because he's performing so well. And even if this is kind of the peak of what you're going to get from him this season, we know that throughout his career, he's been a very good fourth outfielder. And he can be that for a team, and that team option for next year essentially gives you a year and a half of that. But then for the Orioles, as they look ahead to 2026, there's an argument to be made that the path back to contention is a lot easier with Ramon Laureano on the roster than it is without him. So, Connor, I'll start with you here again, and let's start with Laureano. How do you see that situation playing out?
It's probably the most interesting name at the deadline. I think the other ones, not that they're cut and dry again, but I think the other decisions are more based on what other teams think of these players rather than what the Orioles think of these players. For Mullins, I've been trying to figure this out for a month now, and I still don't really know what his value is on the trade market. And maybe him being hot right now helps, but I have no idea. I lean towards them holding him because I just have no idea. We talked about Sugano and Eflin. It's only if another team is willing to say, we think this guy could help us, right? The Orioles would certainly be willing to deal them. Laureano's, and even Kittredge, who has the option, right? If a team came calling with a good offer, the Orioles are easily sending away Andrew Kittredge. The Laureano one is so interesting because if you deal Laureano, you are probably signing a player like him in the offseason. You could argue that maybe if you think you can have a healthy O'Neill and that Dylan Carlson can kind of play that role and you bring him back, you don't sign a player like that. But the O's have signed a veteran like that pretty much every year under Mike Elias. Whether they've been bad or good, they've gone for a guy like that. And this one has worked out better than any of the previous ones. On one hand, you could say no one in that pool of 1 year, $5 million players is going to give you more production than Ramon Laureano. On the other side, you could say the Orioles just got that kind of production for 1 year and $5 million. Couldn't they do it again? And Laureano, he's had these streaks. This is more than a streak. This has been a great season, but he's had these bunches of getting hot in his career, and he's never really put it together, especially since he left Oakland season after season. And I think it's very likely that Laureano in 2026 is not the hitter he has been in 2025. That option is cheap. A team is always going to want to play. He's going to be rostered somewhere no matter what next year. Teams always want a player like that. I think you could really capitalize on his value, and I think there's a chance, especially because this team's, injury or not, they're not trading Felix. I don't think that was really ever going to happen. It would be kind of hilarious if they had traded Trevor Rogers, but I really don't think that was going to happen either. In terms of the legitimate trade candidates the O's have, there's a scenario where Laureano can bring you back more value than anyone else just because of how well he's playing and how cheap he is controlled for next year. I see Mike Elias maybe not fully actively shopping him like he is the other guys, but it being more of a Brian Baker situation where someone calls and says, we want this guy for this. And Elias says, all right, this is a guy we signed for 1 year who's a journeyman. Take him. And he just goes.
Yeah, I think Laureano's gone. I don't think there's any way that Mike Elias doesn't use that option as leverage to and combine him with the Kittredge, two optionable guys, maybe to the Phillies for a Mick Abel. God, I would love that trade. But yeah, I just think because you have Dylan Carlson, you have Tyler O'Neill very likely to be back. You have Judd Fabian, Dylan Beavers. I think you can fill the hole in a career year for a 30-year-old Ramon Laureano. It's career best WRC plus coming into tonight, and he's already got his 15th home run of the season. I just think it's the perfect combination of sell high, and I think Mike Elias has proven he knows how to sell high on guys like that. So, yeah, I think Laureano's gone. I think Mullins is gone no matter what. I think, center field, I think defensively he's shown he can still go get the ball or at least make the plays when he gets to the ball, whether the metrics have gone down significantly or not on the advanced analytics. But I just think that's a position of need and scarcity that his value will be good enough to justify, because you're not going to offer him the qualifying offer no matter what, in my opinion, if you keep him around. So I think he's as good as gone as well. And yeah, I think I'm curious to see if the team will decide to do like one player only trades to get a bulk of prospects in, or if they want to try to, combine some of them to get a better quality player like a Mick Abel potentially in a dream scenario.
Well, and I was listening to a Brewers show this morning, catching up on all the podcasts I missed out on last week, and they were heavy on Ryan O'Hearn because Andrew Vaughn playing well since being traded over there, but looking for that left-handed platoon guy with Andrew Vaughn, and then potentially, outfielders. Sal Frelick, you don't know if he's going to stay healthy. Just the whole outfield situation over there in Milwaukee. You don't know if these guys are going to stay healthy or not. So a really good insurance option as well. And I'm thinking, all right, well, Milwaukee's got this, a lot of pitching they could deal from. Obviously, Nestor Cortez coming back, don't want him, but he is coming back. He's ready to go from Milwaukee. And they just optioned Tobias Myers, old friend, down to AAA. It looks like he's pumping 97 the other day. Great year last year. I don't really know what happened this year and why he hasn't seen a ton of time in the big leagues, but he's been really solid down there in AAA again this year. And it's like, all right, could you would you want to swing a deal like a Ryan O'Hearn? Could you get like a Tobias Myers-esque pitcher back in return straight up? Or there's also, I know Baseball America put out the article a couple weeks ago, like prospects that were blocked. And you look at Milwaukee's system and Logan Henderson is sitting there. Like, would you add more to a Ryan O'Hearn
Yes.
to get a guy like Logan Henderson? Like, could that be a deal that would be a win-win for everybody? So yeah, I don't know. I just became fixated on Milwaukee after listening to that show this morning. And like, there's some interesting pitching. Tobias Myers is the guy who I'm like, I would need to look more into, like what happened this year. But I mean, if we can get some major league ready pitching back for a Ryan O'Hearn rental, even if you have to throw in a prospect or something, like I'm down for that type of trade as well, 100%.
Yeah, I want one of those type of trades, like whether it's the Mets for old friend Nolan McLean or Jonah Tong, that's the dream. Nick Abel, one of those type of guys. But also, I know a lot of Orioles fans want to see major league ready guys that'll turn around next year and help the team out. For me personally, this trade deadline is about just get the best talent available, boost the farm system, and then you have more whatever assets to work with in the offseason to swing a trade to buy for next year. But yeah, that would be great. Logan Henderson, the way he dominated the Orioles earlier this year, so it'd be nice to get him on our side.
I think it's a good segue to go over to O'Hearn now. This seems to me to be the player that is the most obvious to be traded, just given how he has performed this year and given that his value has never been higher than it is right now. And the Orioles can get seemingly a decent amount for him at this deadline. And perhaps if they would choose to do so in the offseason, pursue a reunion through free agency. But that could be getting ahead of ourselves a little bit now. But all agree that O'Hearn is going to get traded. But I guess what I would want to hear from you all is, where do you see him as a fit, and what's a realistic expectation for a return?
I think he's almost a fit anywhere, to be honest with you. I mean, just because he's a strong side, platoon, first base, DH, you can maybe Trey Mancini style get away with putting him in a corner outfield spot in certain parks, or if you've got a really good center fielder. But just the bat alone, I think, can help any team, even bench bat when he's not starting. And no one wants him to find a new home in a playoff contender more than Kobe Mayo, potentially, who is really coming alive lately. And would love to see him get everyday at bats. But yeah, I think O'Hearn, a team like the Astros, a team like the maybe not the Phillies, but just honestly any contender could use him. Detroit, list goes on. So another guy who I think might get more in return than a lot of people expect, just because a lot of teams will be in on him.
Was it Seattle? I know they just traded for Josh Naylor, but I mean, looking at their stuff, I mean, even first base or even DH, they're looking at roster resource has Jorge Polanco as their DH right now. Right fielder Dominic Calzone, like Seattle could be a fun option as well. Yeah, I think, and again, you hate to see it for Eugenio because he's having this monster year, and could he help a team? But if he's going to be out, like we just talked about, and that boosts the O'Hearn value, I think we're going to really like what we get back for Ryan O'Hearn. Honestly, I'm expecting this, and maybe I'm just setting myself up to be let down, but I'm expecting that to be like the biggest return and most fun return, I think.
Yeah, 3 days ago we would have just looked at the Josh Naylor return. I mean, they're actually eerily similar players to both be on the market at the same time. They're both first basemen, left-handed hitting, impending free agents who have slug kind of profiles, but don't actually slug as much as you think. They both walk more and strike out way less than you would think as well. They're not really your typical kind of big, meaty, left-handed hitting first baseman, except O'Hearn's had a better offensive year and is, especially this year, much better defensively at first base and can play the outfield, whereas Naylor, I don't think, has done that in 2 years. O'Hearn's not great out there, but can at least do it to give you a little more roster flexibility. Naylor's a little less platoon prone, so that's a touch in his direction. Has like 4 good years, whereas O'Hearn has 3 in his career. So they're very similar players. So I would have said, hey, look at the 2 pitchers that Arizona got back from Seattle and say, if the Orioles got 2 pitchers like that, one kind of big league ready reliever who had just debuted with the Mariners, Garcia, before he was traded, and one guy a little lower in the system who you have some upside and some hope for, basically a better version of the Soto trade. You think All right, you'll take that. And then if Suarez is going on the IL, if he's got some sort of broken bone in his wrist, I think the calculus changes immensely. Now, O'Hearn can't play third base, so that's a little bit different. But Ryan McMahon's already been moved. So in terms of the third baseman out there, you're probably, as a team, if Suarez isn't out there, you're just looking more for a corner guy than a specific third baseman because things kind of go away. And geez, speaking of guys getting hit, Cade Stroud just hit George Springer in the head, so hopefully he's okay. He is still down after taking a fastball. But anyway, this is an interesting spot now for the Orioles. And O'Hearn, and I think another weird thing is he hasn't really been that great since June 1st, and I think that might scare teams a little bit, that he could go into like a platoon player who's not playing at his best right now. How much does that drop his value? But if teams are desperate for a bat and they're only willing to pay rental prices, are there guys better than O'Hearn out there if Suarez isn't available and Naylor's already traded? Like, maybe not. And you think what the Orioles got for a rental Trey Mancini, who did not have the track record that O'Hearn had over the previous 3 years, for not a lot of fault of his own from really what he went through. Yeah, that was 3 years ago, and this is now. But if you could get an upgraded version of the McDermott Seth Johnson deal, I mean, that would be unbelievable. So we'll see what they can do, but they're definitely in an interesting spot with him, and I definitely think he will be dealt. I don't see a scenario where he's an Oriole on August 1st.
Yeah, you take that trade if you can get a repeat of that every time. And speaking of third baseman, maybe Ramon Arias get a little more available with Suarez going down potentially if they think they could maximize his value. And especially with Jeremiah Jackson just bursting onto the scene, maybe that's your new Ramon Arias for the next few years.
Go over to Cedric Mullins now. And Bob, I know you kind of gave your thoughts on this earlier, but Nick, I'll start with you here. What do you think happens with Mullins? Is he dealt at the deadline, or do you think that between his value kind of going through these weird ebbs and flows throughout the season and there just not being a lot out there for him, and the fact that, you know, if nothing else, you've got a decent defensive center fielder who can give you a little bit of punch offensively, the Orioles hold on to him for the rest of the year and let him ride out his contract? What do you see happening?
I still think he's going to get moved as well. I think some team is going to – you need that old school GM that's going to watch the highlights from these last couple of days and say, I want that.
Rockies need it. They need it.
Rockies need a whole lot more than Cedric Mullins.
Angels?
I mean, I just think it's – again, it's almost kind of like the Zach Eflin thing, though. It's like if what you're going to get back in return – and now I'm thinking, never mind. Erase that point. I was thinking – From like a fan perspective, do you give Orioles fans something here by letting Mullins work out the remainder of his contract? But we know this front office does not care about that.
Not a reason front office.
Not a reason to keep him. I don't know. We'll see how this shakes out. Nothing's really happened yet. We still have a couple of days here. We'll see who. I think you still move him. You have to. Like you said, anybody who's on that expiring deal, this is your chance. Yeah, you may not have that big home run trade that happens. I feel like this deadline, even if there's 6 or 7 deals, even if there's a ton of deals, a lot of fans are probably going to be pretty upset. It doesn't matter what happens. People are going to get upset. But a lot of fans are going to be more upset because it could end up being a lot of deals if it's just one player at a time. A lot of deals like this Gregory Soto trade, which, you know, for the 4 of us and people like us, we're going to have fun with this, learning about these new guys and seeing how they fit into the organization. But I still think this is an opportunity to bring as much talent into the org as possible. And so you got to take advantage of that talent, right? They nailed the draft, and now step 2 here is a trade deadline. You got to take advantage of this because, as we've talked about, yes, we're a minor league focused show. Yes, we may be higher on some guys than a lot of other people, but at the same time, we've been very upfront and candid about, like, there are holes in this system. Like, it needed an energy boost this year. And also, if you're able to, even if you're able to move Cedric Mullins for a piece or anybody for a lesser piece, maybe it's not a guy who you necessarily see fitting into your organization right now or in 2 or 3 years. But, like, what percentage of trades or is this organization targeting anybody for a potential future trade? We're saying we're going to get this piece now with the hopes of, in the offseason, moving him to this team or that team and as part of a bigger deal, you know, a domino effect or whatever. But yeah, I think you kind of have to move him if you can get something at this point.
Yeah, exactly. I just think because I believe, and I'm assuming that the organization feels the same, that this year is just like a blip. It's like it's baseball. It happens between injuries, bad luck, maybe just poor performance, what have you. This year sucked, plain and simple. But I don't think this year is an indication of how the next few years should go, at least in my opinion. I think this offense is going to be really good. And I think the pitching coming up with hopefully a better offseason, I think you can get right back on the horse. So the silver lining is that this year sucked so bad. You can take you have to wring every ounce of advantage you can from this trade deadline and just move as many players that won't be here next year either way, for whether it's low A, double A, close to the majors. You guys got to bring a bunch of guys in here to kind of boost the farm system, use that to your advantage. And the cool thing, at least for me, for us, people like us, even if you trade everybody up to 10 trades, if you include the Soto and Baker trades in there, I don't think the team's going to be much worse, honestly, just because you can bring up a Dylan Beavers, see what you got, Jeremiah Jackson, Samuel Basayo, mid to late August, early September. There's some intriguing arms, Cameron Foster. Let's see what he's got. Some of the other guys that are already up, like Grant Wolf from Alpha, as Vivek likes to call him, Cade Stroud, get the control under wraps. But a bunch of guys like that, Geraldo, that you can see what you have for next year, give them a little tryout. So I think it's just too good of an opportunity because I don't expect to be in this position again anytime soon. So, yeah, I think everybody that conceivably could go will go.
This episode brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Do you ever find yourself playing the budgeting game? Shifting a little money here, a little there, and hoping it all works out? Well, with the Name Your Price tool from Progressive, you can get a better budgeter and potentially lower your insurance bill too. You tell Progressive what you want to pay for car insurance, and they'll help find you options within your budget. Try it today at Progressive.com. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Price and coverage match limited by state law. Not available in all states.
Did you know 39% of teen drivers admit to texting while driving? Even scarier, those who text are more likely to speed and run red lights. Shockingly, 94% know it's dangerous but do it anyway. As a parent, you can't always be in the car, but you can stay connected to their safety with Greenlight Infinity's driving reports. Monitor their driving habits, see if they're using their phone, speeding, and more. These reports provide real data for meaningful conversations about safety. Plus, with weekly updates, you can track their progress over time. Help keep your teens safe. Sign up for Greenlight Infinity at greenlight.com/podcast.
Let me throw this question out, and I think that this is really, for me, one of the big takeaways from this deadline. And Connor, I'll start with you on this. I think we know what the mandate is from Mike Elias in this front office, which is get what you can for the players who aren't going to be around next year. But at the same time, keep this roster viable enough that with a few moves in the offseason, they're back to contention in 2026. And the long-term health of the organization is still intact after all of this is said and done. So in that sense, what would, in your mind, success look like coming out of this deadline? I think there's going to be a lot of discussion around Mike Elias has to get this right. And, of course, we're not going to know what right looks like for a while. But what would getting it right in the here and now look like for you?
Yeah, I mean, so much of what I've been talking about on my show is kind of how it looks in 2026 could judge it, because they need to be looking for some players. I mean, so far they're, I guess you could say, 1 for 2 in getting something back that could help you in 2026 in their trades. Slater DeBrun's not going to help you next year, and neither is Aracena, but Foster could. He's 26. He could absolutely be in the bullpen next season. But you can't, even looking at it right now, like guys who you can project who are older, who are in AA and AAA, you want to get some of those guys because that's the best depth to have in the moment when you are a winning baseball team, is have depth that is in AAA and is major league ready-ish, major league ready enough to help you if you need it. But you also can't fully grade the deadline off of that, because if you get a bunch of 4A players back at a trade deadline, they might appear in an Orioles uniform in 2026. They might get some hits. They might get some outs. That's great. But what's the upside there, right? You get 5 4A guys back. Maybe you can flip one of them into a legitimate major leaguer. Is that really a good deadline in the end? Even if they do find a Cano, if they get 5 other guys trying to find a Cano and there's only one of them who comes out of it, is that really what you want to do? I've been talking about trying to find the next Yennier Cano. I think that should be one of the goals of the deadline, but it can't be the only goal. They still need to, while doing that, stock the farm system with other higher upside guys like Arcina. You would like it to be arms, but if it's bats, it's bats. I mean, there's not the same amount of bats in this system just because there can't be the same amount of bats there was in the system a couple of years ago with how good it was. It's just impossible to do that again, probably, without picking number 1 every year like they were. I think you need to kind of thread the needle with both, but I think the best way to win it here and now probably is end up with a starting pitcher who's starting games for you this year in the major leagues. I think that is the way. And again, could they get a starting version of Cameron Foster who appears in a game this year? Yes. But I'm not as much talking about a 26-year-old who still has some questions and is just getting his feet wet in AAA. I'm talking about a Mick Abel type of player where we've seen him throw in the big leagues or we're going to see him throw in the big leagues shortly after the deadline. And I'm not saying you have to find Cole Reagans. That was kind of a 1 in a million trade, it seemed, for the Royals for Aroldis Chapman. But something in that mold where you get a player you can circle and say, it's not just that he'll throw 12 innings for us next year and, be our Yarmil Geraldo or whomever. You need to circle a guy that's going to say, hey, if Cade Povich struggles or Brandon Young struggles or we suffer a couple of injuries, this is the guy who's going to be there. Or even better, hey, if this we can see this guy being our number 5 breaking camp next year, being our number 4 breaking camp next year. It's going to take them packaging some major leaguers together probably to get that, to Bob's point. But I think that's the easiest way to say success right now. If on August 15th, one of these trade return guys throws 6 innings of 2-run ball at Camden Yards, that is kind of the easiest, soonest level to say, wow, you can dream on that guy. You can dream on that guy doing the same thing over and over again next year when it matters a lot more for the Orioles.
Yeah, for me, I think that's perfectly said, Connor. That would be a slam dunk for me. That's A+. If you can get a Mick Abel or, like you said, anyone that after the season ends, you're looking for spring training, you're looking forward to next year, and you're like, he's going to compete for a starting role. No matter who they bring in the offseason, he's going to be competing for a role in the team breaking camp, or at least to get a lot of innings in 2026 at some point. But just success in general, give me 10 of the Gregory Soto trades, and I'll call that a success. I just think, for me personally, I completely get it if that's not good enough for some people, but the organization has good depth, but it's mostly in the lower minors, and then in AAA, there's guys ready to come up. But we need that sagging middle that we've been talking about. That's the area of concern for me, that just to keep things moving, especially on, of course, pitchers. Great, yeah, more pitchers the better. The more bullets you have in the chamber in that front is great. But even position players, AA, high A, that area, I'm all about it. Just make as many trades as possible, and let's give some people some tryouts to end the year and get some optimism heading into the offseason.
I had one question I wanted to pose to you guys. I think you guys answered that one pretty perfectly there. Something I was listening to, we talking about all these trading the guys on expiring contracts, and maybe we don't think some bigger names would be traded, but I was actually listening to Locked On Mariners podcast earlier this week, maybe it was last week, but Joe Doyle was on. We all love Joe, and they touched on the trade deadline, and Joe threw out, this was before the Josh Naylor trade, and he was talking about he wasn't super high on trading a lot of their top prospects for some rentals, and I believe in his words, he felt like the market was maybe primed for a bigger type of swing trade. And he used the Orioles as an example. And, we don't have to get to the particulars of his trade proposal, but just the idea of a bigger trade like this. He threw out the idea of something like a moving Jordan Westberg to Seattle for a Bryce Miller and a Harry Ford type of deal. Again, maybe not the particulars there, but any chance do you guys think we see that type of deal Baltimore make? Or are we at no, it's the expiring contract guys, maybe a Kittredge or a Laureano guys with the options attached to them, and the bigger trades look more to the offseason for that. I just thought it was an interesting point that he brought up and wondered what you guys thought about that.
Well, Nick, I think
trade-
that this is actually a perfect segue into our final segment.
Okay.
Last call brought to you by Checkers. Oh, wrong banner. Last call brought to you by Checker Spot Brewing, located at 1421 Ridgely Street. Checker Spot is not far from Camden Yards, making it the perfect place for a pre- or post-game drink. And while you're at the ballpark this year, be sure to head to the beer stand behind home plate to get one of Checker Spot's signature beers, The Bird is the Word. Now, the question I had originally written was, will we see any surprises at the deadline? But I think the scenario that Nick just posed, which is that the Orioles move Jordan Westburg or a player of that type to get a lot in return, would classify as a surprise. So whether it's Westburg or someone else, do we see any really big, bold, unexpected trades this offseason, this deadline in that mold? And I will start with Connor here.
It's just so risky to do it now. And you're also looking at a time at the deadline where these big controllable players end up being a little more expensive at the deadline, whereas there's not as much pressure to move them. And that's why you see, that's kind of the basis of why you see so many more rentals moved at the deadline. And teams are willing to wait 3 more months that are rebuilding to trade their guys with multiple years of control. It's because there's not that external pressure. Maybe if a guy only has 1 more year beyond this, there's a little pressure because you start thinking about, year and a half versus a year, we can get a little bit more for this guy. But if a guy's got 2.5, 3.5 plus, whatever it may be, teams are willing to eat those 2 months to just kind of regroup themselves and look at where they are before they make kind of a franchise altering trade like that. You don't see a lot of those happen at the trade deadline. If you're asking me, could it happen in the offseason? Yeah, I think it could. I mean, Jordan Westburg is going to be a very valuable player for this Orioles team. Had 3 more hits on his bobblehead night on Monday. He's been really good since coming off the IL, but he's also had some injury issues the past year or so. If that's the guy they would have to move to get the top line, many years of control starter, I absolutely think that's a deal that could happen. I don't see it happening until the offseason. If it does, and I think for the Orioles, here's the other thing. This is going to sound silly, but there's probably some of this going on in the front office. The O's have so many rental guys to talk to other teams about and to wheel and deal. And they have, like, as I've said, 3 guys they absolutely have to trade. And then, you can throw the O'Hearns and a couple of other guys in that mix where it's like they should probably trade them, right? If they get an offer for a Mullins, a Laureano, a Kittredge, guys like that, and Eflin, a Sugano. They have so many names to worry about. There's only so much manpower to then turn around and think about the repercussions of what would be a somewhat franchise altering deal if you traded Jordan Westburg at this moment. So if the Orioles were a team that, was even younger, didn't have as many veterans, maybe it was just like Dominguez to deal. They had 1 veteran reliever left and that was kind of it. I think it would be more possible. But when you could potentially see the Orioles deal, 5, 6 more guys at this deadline, I don't know if you give the just needed amount of time to make a huge deal like that. And when you have time to do it in the offseason and the price is probably a little bit lower at that point, I think that's probably when something like that, not that it will, but could happen.
Exactly. That's my thoughts exactly. I don't think there's any chance that Jordan Westburg, Colton Cowser, any of that caliber is traded at the deadline. I do think there could be a surprise, but not of that caliber. And that's why I also don't think I would love to see it. Like if the Orioles go out and trade for Sandy Alcantara just to get a head start on 2026. But again, you're paying a premium at the deadline when in 3 months that price is going to go down because the years of control goes down. And especially for a team like the Orioles, there's just no value in the second half of the season anyway. I think it's similar type of thing for selling a guy of that caliber with team control. But I do think there could be a surprise. I think a guy like I mentioned earlier, Ramon Arias, maybe Ryan Mountcastle, if teams are scouting his rehab down in AAA, he's looking pretty good. Or maybe a Yunier Cano type of guy who just a team could bowl you over, kind of like Brian Baker. He had years of control, but the team went out and tried to get him, and they made an offer that Michael Elias couldn't refuse. So I do think there will be like one surprise trade in the mix come deadline day, but I don't think it's going to be anyone that's like a part of the core of this team right now.
Yeah, Nick, the premise you brought up is an interesting one, and it's one that I think would definitely show creative thinking on both sides in a deadline market that I think is filled with rentals, but not necessarily a lot of high upside pieces with years of control left. I think that if the Orioles make a surprise move, it's something like last year's Trevor Rogers trade on a smaller scale. And the reason that I go back to that is that last year the Orioles clearly saw something in Rogers. I said at the time that I thought that was more of a move for 2025 than it was for 2024. And from what we've seen of Rogers in the major leagues this year, they were correct to think that. But they also didn't have the runway last year to go out and watch him get shelled when they're in the middle of a playoff race. So that's why that trade looked so bad in the immediate aftermath. This year, though, you can go with that upside play because what does it matter? So if there's a guy that you kind of like the same way you liked Rogers last year and you think you can get him for a reasonable return and you can stick with him in the major leagues for the rest of this year as long as he's healthy with an eye towards making him better in 2026, that's not a bad move to make. And as I started to think about who could be out there that fits this bill, one name I kept coming back to is JP Sears. And I feel like he's always been one of those pitchers whose stuff is better than results. The A's clearly aren't going anywhere. I don't think that's going to happen because I don't think the A's and the Orioles match up very well. Not to mention that the A's do have a lot of leverage because of the years of control that Sears has left. But if you're going to swing a move that's a little bit out of the box, that's kind of the direction I think they go in.
Yeah, it was fun to think about. At least it's always, at least the entertainment coming in this deadline is definitely come from listening to other team-centric podcasts, and they're ready to swarm on this Orioles team and think they can get a lot of guys for also cheap. A lot of Padres discussion about trading for Adley Rutschman. Even yeah, listen to like an hour-long episode about that this morning as well. So good times. Love the trade, parts of the trade deadline at least.
Ethan Salas for Adley Rutschman.
I'm out. I'm done with this podcast if that happens.
Yeah, seriously, we might have to retire. What was I going to say? Yeah, just that is a good point, Zach. I could see that, but also a guy like Carson Wisenhunt, he's making his major league debut tonight. Maybe if the Orioles see he looks good in orange and black on a major league mound, they might try to get him. What was the other possibility that I was thinking of? I lost it. But there's plenty of young guys that are right on the cusp, like a Wisenhunt, like a McAble. So hopefully we're able to snag one of those guys. I'm sure we'll be talking a lot about it, whether it's an emergency podcast come Thursday evening or next Monday. We'll have a lot to digest, that's for sure.
Absolutely. And Connor, thank you for joining us tonight. And before you go, let our listeners know what they can expect from Locked On Orioles between now and Thursday's deadline.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. It's the deadline coverage is kind of over at Locked On Orioles. Like the last 2 weeks were kind of the deadline weeks, and now we just wait for the moves to happen. So as soon as any move happens, unless it's a little small like DFA trade, if it's any of these guys we've talked about tonight, probably won't be able to go live. If it's in the middle of the day because I do work a 9-to-5 job. But once I get home, I will be hopping on Locked On Orioles to break down the trade. And there will still be episodes this week recapping the Orioles win from Monday and recapping their games against the Blue Jays. And then I will go live Thursday at 6:15 on the Locked On Orioles YouTube channel. I'm sure you guys are doing something during the deadline as well. So if that is the case, everyone, laptop on The Verge, phone on Locked On Orioles, different pair of headphones, one in each ear, and you'll have a great time on Thursday evening.
Perfect.
And we will be back later this week, most likely. You can stay tuned to our socials for that. And we are on many social media channels, including Facebook, Instagram, Threads, X, TikTok, YouTube, Twitch, and Blue Sky. We are also over at Substack, OriolesOnTheVerge.substack.com. Nick has an article up over there now about the Gregory Soto trade, and I'm sure we will have more written coverage of the deadline there over the next few days. And while you're browsing around the internet, be sure to head over to Patreon and become a member of our community today. It's at $3, $5, or $10 levels. You can get access to bonus weekly shows from Bob, Nick, and myself, as well as monthly updates to our top 50 prospects, exclusive chats in our Discord channel, and much more. So you're not going to want to miss that. For Bob Phelan and Nick Stevens, this is Zach Spen. You've been listening to Orioles on the Verge, part of the Believe Podcast Network.
You know who's surprisingly good with money? Greenlight Kids. The other day, mine stopped to think about the ROI on a bag of chips. Seriously. From getting paid for doing chores around the house to saving up for concerts, Greenlight's teaching my kids how to handle their money.
Greenlight your kids' financial future with the #1 family finance and safety app. Try Greenlight risk-free at greenlight.com/podcast.